Hey there, and welcome to Work Dope, a podcast on the messiness and the potential of humans at work. I'm Linda Stacy, and I'm a corporate sellout, and I'm a corporate innovator, and I like to think that working in corporate America doesn't have to suck. Admittedly, it often does. By some statistics, up to 80% of the workforce are dissatisfied with their experience at work. On the flip side here is that folks are expecting work to create more meaning and purpose in their lives. They're really basing their identity on their roles inside of organizations. The pandemic and the Great Resignation has forced us to take a look at quality of life and what culture really means for people inside of organizations. Of course, I think business is cool. I think that building things and solving real world problems and creating, these are all fundamental to the best parts of the human experience. This is how we embrace human potential. I'm on a mission to reinvent the work experience, and I'm committed to bringing insights, tools, and inspiration to folks at all levels within an organization, but most importantly, the individual contributors, the folks with the tireless jobs that keep wheels from falling off the bus. In this episode, I'm chatting with Jeannie Moravec-Smith. Jeannie has over 30 years of combined experience in positions of human resource generalists, manager, director, executive, inspirational speaker, facilitator, coach, and consultant. Jeannie and I talk about her roots and climbing the corporate HR ladder, starting in a position where, at the time, HR was called personnel management, and HR wasn't seen as strategic. She shares some cool stories about how you live your values within the work environment. We talk about self-esteem at work. We talk about this theme of mentor as coach and how to be a better boss, and just how to be a better self-led contributor. We also talk about some fantastic questions that a boss can ask. And of course, there's more to say about this and how to turn it around so that you can get the benefit of such questions, even if you're not the boss. I hope you enjoy this episode. Jeannie, thrilled to have you on Work Dope today. How are you?
I am good. Very good. How are you?
I am well. Thank you. This is fantastic.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes, for sure. I have read a formal bio for you in my intro, but I like to ask people how they describe what they do at a cocktail party. How would you describe to your friends or family members?
I think it depends on the cocktail party, but I say that I help leaders show up badass so they can attract and retain their top talent.
Awesome.
And that goes really well with a cocktail in your hand because people are like, oh, really? How do you do that? And then I go on and describe the different areas of human resources, leadership, and organizational development that me and my team can partner with any leader in any organization to really enhance their work environment, their staff, communication, performance management, all of it.
Awesome. And I think that folks will know as we continue to talk that you live the badassery, if that's I mean, it comes through in your stories. So I can't wait to hear some of those come out. Something else I like to ask every guest is around inflection points, career history. What are some of the highlights or the things going back? I know we've talked previously and you said, you do kind of have a more kind of traditional, you've stayed in one career primarily, although the split between corporate and then going into your own business. So tell us about those inflection points.
So I never really fully knew what I wanted to do when I grew up, but it was very obvious to me when my passion started to percolate. And it was in my undergrad when I was looking to use my units as efficient as possible and get out of school, because most of the classes in marketing that I was majoring in were impacted. And when I started taking public administration classes, which I'm not a government person and no offense to anybody who is, it's just I learned it wasn't me. But I did do an internship at the city of Chula Vista here in San Diego in their HR department. But I was also taking courses, and yes, back then, because I have many years of experience, back then it was personnel management. And it soon was very obvious to me that I even changed my words. Rather than saying, I have to go read this book or I have to study for this test, I get to. And I actually just got the chills saying that, because looking back in time, that really was where I discovered that my passion for human-centric work and helping bridge the gap between managers and employees, leaders and employees and organizations really started to percolate. And so that was a pivotal point in my life. And so, yeah, looking back now, 3 decades of 8 human resource experience, I can't believe that, because statistically, most people change their career 3 different times in their life. And 2 or 3 times, and maybe even more so now, people have such diverse work lives. Every day they have like their hand in 5 different buckets. So it is interesting that I've stuck it out, because there's not a lot of things in my life that I've ridden kind of the same path. I'm always making changes, which I think is important to change and learn. But that was a huge one for me. And then when I left corporate in 2005, only to come back and assist them in a consulting capacity, was huge. It was huge. People were saying, you know, HR they don't consult like that. You need to be in-house. You need to be a W-2. And I'm like, I too had those little gremlins, but I had this mentor, my financial advisor, who was telling me, if anybody can do this, you can. And, you know, it's similar to what my parents used to tell me. And he really was like, I don't see why you can't go out on your own. So he was really a mentor to me. Sadly, he passed away too early on in life. But he pushed me over those gremlins and those beliefs that I thought, oh, I can't do it. And so, yes, now we're pushing 18 years of running my own business, and it's not easy. That's the part, that's the messy, ugly part. Like you think, oh, I'm going to go be my own entrepreneur. I'm going to do this, create this. But when you're on your own, oh my gosh, you no longer have that paycheck every 2 weeks directly deposited in your account. Oh, you have to figure out how to get health insurance. What else? You have to be the you have to be the CFO, the CEO, the COO, the employee, the marketer, everything. So it's ugly, but the rewards are huge too. So you have to determine, like, what does it mean to you? The flexibility of creating my own schedule and not having to go to the same parking spot, walk in the same doors, say good morning to the same people every Monday. How was your weekend? And then at the end of the week, oh, have a nice weekend. You know, it's just like too structured for me. So a lot of times in my life, I didn't, like I said, didn't always know what I wanted to do when I grew up, but I certainly paid attention to the things that I didn't want to do. And that really helped me make the decisions that I have to be where I am today.
Interesting. So you've seen a lot of change, I'm guessing, over 30 years in personnel management to human resources. Are there any big things that you would speak to there?
Most recently, I'm going to speak on the last 2 years. Now we can look back. I was talking to someone the other day about women in the 80s were expected to wear pantyhose to work. Like, do people even buy pantyhose? Like, I think I would itch all day long wearing pantyhose.
I have to just interject that I was waiting tables at a Hungry Hunter in the early 90s in Ventura, California. And same thing. I had to wear panty, and they even wanted them to be like tan. I felt like a mid 80s or early 80s flight attendant. And it was horrifying. The day they let us wear, and that's not that long ago. Anyway, but go ahead. I mean, it's
not that long ago. So we can talk about just how you were expected to show up, what you were expected to do in the work world, not only men, but women. Like, we can go on and on. We could talk days about this. And then looking now, like what's happened in the last 2 years since 2020, and now here in 2022, I mean, huge changes. Now, some people would argue that we haven't come that far. Women are still not getting what they deserve. Different races aren't getting what they deserve. And I agree. Like, there's still this bias in the workplace. But I think a lot has changed where people are being treated with dignity and respect. And I can say that that's one thing my mother taught me. And from day one in the work world, day one, when I had my first job, I was fresh out of high school and I had a full-time job before in that summer. And I always treated everyone with dignity and respect. So
Yeah.
whether it be the janitor or the CEO,
Right.
there wasn't preferential treatment to either
Right.
one. I didn't roll out the red carpet for the CEO. I treated him like a human, him or
Mm-hmm.
her.
Mm-hmm.
And they respected that, because
Mm-hmm.
some people used to only tell them what they thought they wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I told them the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I kind of stood out different as an employee and also different as a consultant, because I always ask them, do you want me to tell you what I think you want to hear? Or do you really
Right.
want to know what's going on? And of course, it takes them a little bit of struggle to say, no, I'm ready for the truth.
Okay.
And I think that's important. Like, people should show up in the work world authentically,
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable. Leaders
Mm-hmm.
should definitely share, you know what? I've never been able to say, yes, I want to hear the truth, because I struggle with my ego, for example, but
Right.
I'm ready.
Right.
I'm ready to hear it, because that's how you make major change. Now, that wasn't necessarily, I went kind of off on a tangent.
Yeah,
there,
no, yeah.
because I know your question was what has changed in the work world. And I think right here, right now, 2022, leaders need to be open to change. And the only way they can understand what they need to change is to ask the right questions of the right people. And then sit back and listen to the answers. Truly listen. I've worked with so many leaders who sit there, pretend they're listening, but they're waiting to get their sentence in.
Yeah.
You're not listening.
Right.
When you're truly listening to someone, that's all you're doing is paying attention to what they're saying.
Right.
Huge difference. And I have to say that element of listening is the number one important thing in communication. Like, you have two ears for a reason and one mouth. Zip it and listen.
Right.
I know it sounds silly, but
Yeah.
it's true. And I like to simplify things now, really simplify it. I have this 60-second solution that I just started doing a newsletter on in this little video under a minute, because I know our attention span is short. That's a huge change.
Yeah.
And get to the point. So simplify things and think about that. How simple. 2 ears and a mouth for a reason. Listen twice as much as you talk. And it's amazing what you will learn, what people will share with you. And when they start trusting you and what they share, and that actually change happens based on what they tell you, you'll hear more. And know this, leaders, that you hired these individuals into your organization for a reason. When you were recruiting them, don't forget those feelings that you had for this individual. They're top notch. They're A players. They can add all this value. So stop micromanaging them now that they're in there. Like, empower them to do a good job. And guess what? You'll have less on your plate and you'll have more of a life. So it's simplify. It's not that difficult. Now, I can say this with 30 years of HR and dealing with thousands and thousands of leaders. Yes, I have some experience there. But we can break it down to, like, how are you going to show up today? How are you going to get to know your staff, connect with them in such a way that they trust you and that they will share with you, and because in the end, people want to be valued and they want to add value.
Absolutely. So I have to, well, a few things, but first you brought up respect, and I'm glad that you did. The self-respect and respecting others and having integrity and aligned with who you are. And sometimes when my spidey senses are up, I see certain behavior that I feel like might not be serving an individual or a situation. Sometimes I feel like self-respect might be at the root of that, maybe a poor self-image, poor self-esteem. I actually did an episode on this, and I'm aware of the fact with humans that we kind of go up and down in terms of, like, there's a natural, like, we don't always feel our best and most confident at any given moment. But you were able to demonstrate to a CEO, for example, that you respected them and that you respected yourself, right? I mean, in that communication, and it sounds to me like your mother also fostered respect in the relationship. And I mean, are there key elements that help to foster respect, whether you are the subordinate, the direct report, the individual contributor, or the leader? Because I agree with you that when you treat someone the way that you want to be treated, you get a better response. But if someone hasn't been treated that well for a lot of their life, or they grew up in a household where there was a lack of respect in a fundamental way, I think they're going to have greater challenge with that.
100%, 100%. So remember the golden rule? I don't know if not everyone heard that. You just said it. You want to be treat others like you would want to be treated. And that is, again, the way that I was raised and the way what I brought into the work world. 100% agree with you that a lot of individuals were challenged by different people in their life that caused them to feel this, like, have a low sense of self-esteem and lack of confidence. And that right there causes people to behave in such a way that they create an environment where other people don't feel like they belong. And so absolutely, if individuals learn how to increase their confidence level, and it's interesting that this is coming up right now, because just this week I signed up for a certification in confidence. And I didn't even know there was such a thing. And people would look at me and say, absolutely, Jeannie, you're like one of the most confident people I know. But I love what you just said. We go through cycles. Sometimes we are, it depends on what we're working on. And there is the neuroplasty in your brain that you can win. It has a lot to do with what I say about energy leadership. When things come in and they compromise one of your values, and you feel, for example, respect is one of my top values. So it goes down into survival mode, which is a part of your brainstem, or you can send it up to the frontal lobe of your brain and say, wait a minute, I know what to do with this because I'm well aware that my value of respect is being compromised. Now, how do I want to respond versus react? Because down here is a reaction mode, it's survival mode. And so this is fascinating that this certification in confidence actually just supplements what I already know. So it just gives me a little more tools to help leaders be more confident on a more regular basis. And that's in your home life with everything. And so it's very interesting. But yes, I think most everyone, including myself, have down times and times where we feel badassery, like you said earlier. And you can't sustain that level of badassery all the time. We are not super like Superman and Wonder Woman. And I actually did an exercise 6 years ago in my coaching program. And I came to the realization that I couldn't function like Wonder Woman anymore. I hit a wall. I had hit a wall. And that's a fictitious person. So these people who go, and I got to prove are actually very insecure. And so they need to prove to people. But the reality is, what are you proving to yourself? You have to know who you are at the core, impress yourself. That's how self-esteem grows, right? And confidence grows. It's like, and take baby steps. What are you planning to do today to meet your goals that maybe you have tomorrow? Baby steps, and then celebrate those. That's how you start building confidence. Little things, like people they shoot for the moon, and then it's so hard to ever get there.
Right.
You know what? Today, I'm going to get on my bike, my exercise bike, and I'm going to ride with John Peel in Tahiti. And guess what? Boom, win. Like super excited, right? Like create little wins that you can celebrate, because that's what sends the dopamine into your head. You know, that's where you have that strength to think with the front of your brain. It's amazing. So absolutely. And I think in my experience, the leaders who were the most challenging for me to work with were the least confident.
Right.
In their knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Right.
And so they would not treat those people that they hired the reason they hired them. They wouldn't treat them as well as they should, because they had these insecurities.
Right. So now they need to take their course in confidence.
They do.
Right. And I would say to anyone, you know, in a firm, in a company, whatever, you know, to own yourself, right? Fully own it and look people in the eye. I mean, I think that is like one small thing that and some people aren't very good at it. It's something to maybe work on or practice, but it is an indication. I think that is a self-confidence thing, to be able to actually look someone in the eye when you're talking to them.
That was the number one thing on one of these lists that of
Mm.
this certification I'm taking, is the number one thing was eye contact.
Mm.
And that's interesting that you bring that up,
Mm.
because it has everything to do with confidence. If you are, okay, the fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
If you're faking it and you're BSing your way through things, you can't look me in the eye and talk to me. It's not, unless you're really like a con artist
or a sociopath.
Right. So they tend to like look away, look all around, but they won't look you in the eye. But when you are confident in your knowledge, skills, and abilities, because you've been there, done that, you can look people in the eye and talk to them. There's, or, or what do they say in like interrogations? They're not looking at you because they're lying, right? It's the same thing about this fake it till you make it. I have a pet peeve about that. Like people just pretending that there's something when they're really not. Because it will always backfire. It will always backfire to them, for them. So eye contact. Now let's talk about some of the younger generations. So it's key to use that word. I cannot respect people who categorize like, oh, all these 20-year-olds are this. That is not true. They're not, no, all group. So, but there are some who have a really hard time. And it's really, I don't think they're lying. They haven't even, learned how to do that yet necessarily, but I encourage them to just practice. Look yourself in the mirror and talk to yourself. Are you staring at your own eyes? It's kind of awkward when you start just looking at someone's eyes. And there are those also awkward moments. I've had it where I'm talking to someone and it's kind of like they think I'm looking into their soul a little bit or something. Have you had that? Where it's kind of awkward. So then, blink and look away or whatever. You don't, there's some awkwardness.
Yeah. I don't think, I've also had the experience where I feel like someone is holding my eyes too intently and it feels unnatural. And I'm like, is this person part of a cult or something? It's like, I do think it's natural. And I've heard this in other places where people tend to look up to the right when they're thinking about something that they're saying maybe the first time in a new way. And apparently if they're looking up to the left, they might be conjuring something. There could be a lie going on. I don't know that for sure, but it's natural for us to look up when we're thinking as we're talking. So that's something too. And I also feel that I agree with you that I don't like to stereotype generations, and a lot of the things that happen in a lot of the generations have happened in all of the generations. So I know that I had a harder time with with all of it. Yeah. Self-esteem for sure. Still always working on that. But the eye contact when I was younger, and that develops over time. I think it's something that we need to cultivate and build upon. And
well, think about this. So if we're younger, 15, and we're looking at someone and we're like, oh my God, they're probably wondering why, like, or maybe I'm not feeling smart enough, or maybe, oh my God, they're going to wonder what I'm saying.
Right.
That's where it goes to the brain, the back of the brainstem, the fear factor. Right. So think about what's the worst thing that's going to happen,
right.
And so bring it back to the front, make a decision and say, you know what, I've been in this situation before. My Taekwondo teacher was staring at me and I survived. So what did that feel like? So this is not that bad. Like, okay, because it does. And when you're interviewing, so I'm glad you actually brought this up. When you interview, you are viewed as very insecure if you're not engaging in the conversation by looking at them. And that I've given kind of interview 101, and that's part of it. Like be confident in your body language, including eye contact. So I encourage, like, everything's on YouTube now. Go on YouTube. If anybody listening has a hard time, and like, I'm sure there's a million different practices on how to engage your eyes in a way that's natural.
Right. Absolutely. So in our earlier conversation, you had talked about climbing the corporate ladder in HR and then getting to a certain point. Eventually you decided you wanted to leave Was there a certain experience that definitely made it clear to you that it was time, or was it just a natural, yeah.
No, there were actually many things that were starting to surface and have me feel a certain way, that led to my decision. However, if we back up, climb the corporate ladder, I was literally clerk. 3 days later, I was promoted to assistant. Fast forward, I was, director, senior director, vice president. So now as vice president, I sat on the executive team and I was invited to the board meeting. This is huge because this was not very many HR admin people were invited to the board meeting. We were seen as, oh, you plan the parties and you manage the performance management system, right?
Right.
We weren't HR wasn't seen as very strategic.
Yeah.
So I get invited. I'm super excited. Like, I knew this was like a month away, and the nerves are, oh my God, I'm finally getting to a board meeting. This is huge. So the day came and I walk into the board meeting, and the very most senior board member walks over to me and he asked me, he told me, it wasn't even an ask. He told me, I need a cup of coffee. And this is where what I've been talking about, when information comes in and you're being compromised, your values being compromised, do you flip it to the front and you make a decision that you won't regret? Or do you do something that's going to compromise out of fear?
Yeah.
And if you only have ever in these situations, you only have seconds to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I always knew my plan B. I'm okay being a barista at Starbucks, but it's going to be under my terms, right? So I'm not a barista. I am a vice president of this company. I am a member of this team. I'm the only female in the room, and I'm the youngest female. So that's a whole lot of crap that he wants me to make him coffee. So all this goes on super fast, boom, shoots to the front of my brain. And I say, no, So I grab his hand. This is this still to this day cracks me up. I grab his hand and I start skipping out. He has no choice. I'm like dragging him behind me like a second grade schoolgirl. Come on. And he's just basically, you can imagine what's going on in his mind. Right? So I take him out and I start showing him how to make the coffee. And by the way, I have like sweat pouring down my back. I'm nervous as hell. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. But this will be a good story. At least my mom will be proud that I stood up for myself. And so I could see him going from like frustration to almost amazement to, damn, you go, girl. I kind of respect this, right? So I knew I'm either going to get fired or I'm going to be respected. And so you have to go for what you want when your values are being compromised.
Yeah.
So I even said to him, that saying, when you give someone fish, they eat that day. But if you teach them how to fish, they'll have coffee anytime they want, basically. Right. And I swear, my God, people thought, where did you come from? So we go back into the meeting and I'm thinking, oh, no, here comes, they're going to fire me in front of everybody. They're just going to make a decision right here and now, right in front of me. That is not what happened. And so I was delighted that he started saving me a seat next to him. He started saying, hold on, guys. I think Jeannie has something to share. And I actually even heard him say, wait a minute, Larry, Jeannie just said that, but you guys didn't listen. And I was just like, wow, I had won the lottery. Like, this is amazing. This is exactly what HR wants to do. They want to be here, but it's so hard for people. Yeah. So I highly recommend you have a plan B. And I was okay. Like Starbucks paid pretty good money back then, right? Not what I was making as a VP, but I was willing to just, that's what I had a plan B to pay my rent, right? So I highly recommend people understand what their true core values are. And when you do that, your life is changed, because not only do you understand quickly when they're being compromised, or supported, and how to respond versus react in the situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that had I made him that coffee, I'd probably get kicked off the board because I would be a secretary. I would be a coffee girl. And then what's the point of her being there? And that's what he was trying to prove. He was testing me, and I knew it. So that was important. Now, that's not why I left, because now I finally got the respect. But the more time I spent at the executive level as a W-2 employee, the more frustrated I got. I saw so much that it was mind-blowing. I had a CEO I brought in, as we called them, personnel action notices, and it required 2 signatures, mine and the CEO's, to pay out bonuses. And there was a handful of them. These were people who earned extra bonus on top of their MBOs because they really worked hard and went way above and beyond. He said, I'm not going to sign off on those. And I said, what do you mean? They've earned it. It's not like I'm asking for whatever, something out of the blue. He said, but I want you to sign off on this. And it was a bonus for him.
Wow.
And I said, why? You can't, how can you do this and not this? Why, how can you give yourself that? So that was one time I'm like, you know what? I can't really support this type of behavior. I would go home at night and not sleep. Because I knew that those people earned bonuses weren't going to be paid out because this particular selfish CEO was wanted that pocket that money so he could rebuild his kitchen or something. I don't know.
Right.
So I was like, those kind of things started. And there was a lot of that. And I thought, well, if I go out on my own as a experienced expert at what I do, I can come back into the same organization as a consultant. And strangely, you're valued different.
Yeah. Right.
They would never ask you to do something like that.
Right.
But because I was on their payroll as a W-2, I worked for him, not with him. Right. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
When you become a consultant, you partner with them. You make decisions together. You don't work for them. And so I think that was something that was pivotal for me. And I'm like, you know what? I think it's time for me to go out.
I mean, it occurs to me that you probably spent your entire career with the mentality that I am a partner in this organization, but that type of behavior was showing you that, oh, clearly I'm not seen that way. And this is not
100%.
okay. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And do you have an opinion on, as you were sharing that, it was occurring, I've had this thought in the past that I feel that a CEO is so much different from a family-owned business that gets built up over time. And there's issues in both kinds of organizations. I don't know if you ever worked with a family-owned or something like that, but I almost feel like it's more excusable if that's the okay word, that someone who really has built it up from nothing, if that's the same person running the company, that they can kind of choose. I don't know. This is just something I'm throwing out there, where I feel like if a CEO coming in has a different type of responsibility to the organization, and it is opposite of what you just described in terms of, him deciding how that money is going to be allocated.
There's a huge difference between somebody who built up an organization and put their everything into it. So they might have started it with all of their savings, and guess what? They were eating top ramen to work out of their garage. There's something to be said about that.
Right.
And then I've worked with CEOs who were amazing. They actually respected the organization and everyone in it like they were family. But then there's random one-offs who are in it only for them.
Yeah.
They're in the CEO role so they can get the money. They have the control. They want to control it, and they want to just tell people what to do, whether it's in the best interest of the organization and everyone in it or not. And that's a huge difference. But again, I've worked with CEOs who think about this. So, Gary Ridge from WD-40?
I don't know. Oh,
He's the
I should. Go ahead.
He's the CEO. He was
Okay.
the CEO from WD-40. He is the most amazing leader I think I've ever met. I
Mhm.
didn't work under him. I've met him a couple times. I think he's incredible. He just hired his successor and has set him up for success. So it's a selection process where I'm ready to retire. Who do I bring in that can actually make it even better? So that
Mhm.
circles back right back to the confidence and self-esteem.
Mhm.
People who are insecure are going to bring in people who
Mhm.
are not going to
Yeah.
showcase or aren't going to shine more than them.
Right.
But strong servant leaders are going to
Yeah.
hire people who are even better than them because they're
Yeah.
worried about their entire
Mhm.
existing team. It's a
Right.
huge difference. And really strong leaders, back to that servant leadership, show up in a coach capacity
Mm.
where they're there to serve those who are serving the organization. So what obstacles can I get out of the way for you? What do you need from me? What do you want to pick my brain on? Because I've done it, the last 2
Mhm.
decades. I can
Mhm.
tell, what do you need? And they serve that purpose of helping that person be more successful. And because they're more successful, the organization is more
Mhm.
successful.
Mhm.
Those people feel like they're valued and adding value.
Mm.
Those people will stick around with that leader, with that organization for a long period of time because they're getting what they need out of it.
Right.
The intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, right? Like
Right.
they're getting all of it. They feel like they belong there. And
Yeah.
that's the biggest issue right
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
is they're not treated well.
Right.
They're not able to showcase their own abilities and they
Right.
want to.
Yeah.
And we've had this huge like exodus in 2020, 2021. People all starting their own. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, and I get it, but they realize how challenging it is. So some of
Yeah.
them are now returning back to
Yeah.
the work world, but they have that mentality so that I want to run my job, my department, as if
Mhm.
it's my own business. And that's actually the kind of people you want
Yeah.
because they have passion for doing it right. They understand every dollar and how much it
Right.
costs the organization, and they treat it like they own it. And that's
Mhm.
what you want. So as leaders, respect that.
Right.
Let them run.
Yeah.
Give them the guidelines, poke holes in the process so you can peer in and see how they're doing.
Mm. Mm.
Make sure it's very clear that you've communicated the vision of what is expected of them. And
Right.
if they're failing, guess what? It's your fault. It's
Mm.
your fault because you weren't clearly communicating that, even in the hiring process.
Yeah.
Like from the very get-go. I'm going to
Yeah.
create this position. Here's the expectations. This is what it looks like to be successful. And you communicate that. You ask questions during the interview process that support that. And if
Mhm.
you if you plan and you do your homework in the recruitment process and you communicate,
Mhm.
it should flow.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you missed a step, then you missed a step. It's not that employee's fault.
Right. Right. This is there's so much in this. Um, in my experience in the work world, sometimes positions are created when things are still being figured out. And I think that can sometimes just be the nature of life and work, the work world, that maybe um, there's an evolution, as things are learned about, especially when a brand new position is created or something like that. So
Yes.
it's definitely an iterative, but yes, getting that clarity and vision and working towards a vision, I think is hugely, I agree with you. I mean, it's, so, and you were talking about the boss as coach, which is definitely a theme that I've been, talking to a lot of people about. And I love that you highlighted a few of the things that, I like to actually reverse this a little bit. But so you talked about, the coach boss asking, what are the obstacles, or offering that the direct report, whoever, is picking their brain. What are your needs? And if you're a direct report or an individual contributor who maybe your boss isn't a complete jerk or isn't a total command and control, but isn't really thinking about his or her own leadership tools, an individual contributor could come to their boss using these types of, words and, asking for time to pick their brain on something. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
that I like to think in terms of self-leadership and how someone who, because we all know that there's a ton of bad bosses out there. So there's way more people having bad leadership. So how can they be more effective in their jobs? They can ask for clarity. They can describe what the obstacles are and maybe try to think through or brainstorm some solutions together, that these are ways to maybe hopefully try to navigate that a bit.
Absolutely. And you touched on it a little earlier. You have to manage your own career. You have to be the one in charge of your life, period. People aren't going to hand you things. They're not going to invite you to a promotion. You really have to drive it. And so what you have to do is do your homework. And if you really are driven and you want to climb the corporate ladder, so ask in the interview process in the very beginning. Now we're looking from the candidate's perspective. So I see you have this position, and where do you see, if I were to be hired into this role today? You did a really good job of writing the job description and what I would be responsible for. And thanks for sharing what I would be doing this first year and how I'll be measured and all of this. This is everything you should be sharing with the candidate. So where do you see me in 2 years? And as a leader, where do you see yourself in 2 years? Ask the same questions. During those one-on-ones, when the employee is hired, they should be driving that. So if you don't have a manager who, has all the experience that I have and knows exactly what to do on one-on-ones, why don't you start saying, hey, I would like to start these one-on-ones. I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. When you ask people to share their experience, they will share their experience. Same thing, leaders, when you ask your staff, okay, tell me a little bit more about you. Tell me what you do on the weekend. People love to share their knowledge, especially leaders. So as an employee, ask your leader, hey, I want to get to know you more. When you make that connection and you get to know the whole person, both sides, leaders and employees, you will work much better together. You start getting each other more. You understand, like, oh, you know what, Jeannie, I'm not going to talk to her yet because I think she must have had a rough night last night with her son or whatever, right? Like you know these things, so then you act a little bit differently, or you respect that person a little bit differently because you're well aware of what's happening in their whole life, not just their work life.
Right.
And then also drive the conversation as an employee. For example, you had so here's the vision. So your leader's giving you the vision of the end project and you have questions. Ask those questions. I have met so many people. I don't want to look stupid if I ask that question. I need to tell you, the one reason I was so successful in my career, I asked a million questions. I even had a CEO go, do you ever not ask a question? I'm like, nope. Yeah. Because I guarantee everyone in this room probably has a similar question, but they're afraid to ask.
Right.
So no question is a dumb question. It's just not. Where it becomes a dumb, I don't know, because I don't even like that word dumb. I'm doing air quotes, is when you ask it 15 times. So ask the question once. If you can't see me right now, I have my finger up. Ask the question once, get the answer, write it down. Now, I know we all get caught up. We forget things. Your CEO, your leader will start getting frustrated if you ask the same question over and over again. Yeah. But the first time you ask it, they're thrilled to give you the answer. Keep that in mind. I think that's a huge nugget for people, and it will change the way that they function at work. When in doubt, ask. Just don't be in doubt 15 times.
Yeah, no, and write it down. I mean, it's so key. And I mean, I just know because I feel like I continue to ask a million questions every day in my own work life of my peers, of my boss, it's just the nature of what we do specifically. And we have vats and vats of back documentation of all these questions. It's like we've all got to go search those in order to, and sometimes you just, search fatigue in terms of, just these same questions that can pop up again and again. It's just,
Well, I don't know, like, depending on what people do, that's a great way, create a resource where they could have an intranet and they could search that question. Right. That's a great idea. Like somebody could do that. And that's the same answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's precisely what we do in my organization. I work in a library function at I'm sorry. Yes, a knowledge management company. And sorry, I'm saying this completely wrong. I work in a library function in a management consulting firm. And we do also have a knowledge management function as well. But there's just so much nuance to the work. And I think that more and more these days, you're really depending on a network of people and lots of information flying constantly. That then it becomes, where do you search? And because we have the things that happen in Skype or Teams, depending on what then you might have the intranet or the internal thing. And if it hasn't been designed by someone who actually knows how to design these things, the search function. So there's other complexities around that. And I don't really mean to get off topic, but I think your point is very well taken around the fact that that's where the fatigue comes in, and the annoyance, quite frankly, is when the boss is being asked the same thing again and again. And if it's really a critical thing, maybe there wasn't clarity around it, but maybe there should have been a longer conversation when that was first discussed, if maybe it didn't go in all the way.
So leaders should definitely be clarifying exactly what they want, exactly what the expectations are of that person, the job, the day, whatever it is. And then whomever's doing it needs to ask clarifying questions to be crystal clear. And one great way to do it is to paraphrase back. So what I hear you telling me is that I'm responsible for this and this, due on this date, and you're giving me the freedom to do all this in between, but this is what the end result looks like. Are we on the same page? That doesn't take very long at all. Yeah. And I think both sides of any conversation should do that.
Yeah.
It would really save people time and energy, everything. I wanted to mention, like you mentioned the search engines, and I'm going to date myself, but when the internet first came out, when you would search, you would find what you wanted.
Right.
Now there is so
Just
much
too
information. Right. I get so frustrated. Like on page like 19 on Google, you actually get an answer to, what is a standard cup of coffee? You know what I mean? Like, I hear you. It's our job to just kind of focus in and get to the point. And I think for leaders, communicating clearly is the best thing you could do for the organization, for yourself, for your staff, and employees. Ask. Don't be afraid.
Absolutely. So, and you brought up this, was it a course you taught, or is the Curious Conversations? Was that a part of a program you were doing? Is that the question, the 60-second things?
Okay. Yeah. It's two different things. So, I was part of a summit, and it was a summit called Leaders Communicate Clearly. Okay. And my particular section, I decided to focus on curious communication.
Okay.
And then I'll get back to that in 1 second. The 60-second solutions are, I have been asked thousands and thousands of questions in my career. So I have compiled those questions, and then I answer them in less than 60 seconds in a video that I publish on LinkedIn and Instagram and my website every Friday morning. And then it's followed up with a newsletter, a 1-minute read. It has to be under 60 seconds, 1-minute read newsletter every Friday on LinkedIn that talks about how to address that particular question quickly. And so like today was on leading as a coach. And so there's 3 questions I asked for anyone who's reading the newsletter. Do you do this, this, and this? Because if you don't, maybe you want to start there. Awesome. And so I give every Friday quick tips on how to just kind of get where I'm going, what I've been saying all along in this conversation, and showing up differently as more of a service to the organization and your staff than you have before.
Yeah.
So the curious communication, it's all about asking questions, open-ended, empowering questions. Not, hey, Linda, did you finish the project? Yes. Done. Nope. That's not an open-ended question. So, hey, how are things going today? I noticed that when we met last Friday, you mentioned this, this, and this, and I was able to remove this obstacle. How are things going now? What are you being challenged with? Do you feel like you will still be on track to finish this on, October 30th? If not, why not? Where do you see the roadblocks? And really have that two-way conversation. And again, ask questions, zip it, sit back and listen to the answer. And I say that and I joke around about it and I say it a lot, but there's still people who are like, oh, I think this is probably what's holding you up, right? No, that is not what you want to do. let the person have their moment to talk and share.
Right.
That's how you build that connection. Because what's going to happen eventually is I'm going to come to you and go, oh my God, red flag, red flag, red flag. This happened. But guess what? I came up with this solution, and this happened in my career. Like the shit hit the fan once. And I was like, oh my God, I totally made a mistake. And I need to come up with a solution fast. And then I'm going to go tell the CEO exactly what happened before he hears it from anybody else. And this happened. I'm human. This mistake happened. But by the way, here's 3 solutions that are actually even better than the road I was going down. Which one do you want to take? That's the approach you take. We're human. We make mistakes. So when you have that connection and that relationship with your leader or even other staff members, you are willing to admit when things went wrong. And you need to make mistakes in organizations. Like I said, in that particular solution or problem, those 3 solutions I gave were better than the route I was taking originally.
Exactly.
It was almost like it was great that I had that problem happen. So be okay with that. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. That's how you know what to avoid.
Absolutely.
Like, make mistakes. And I encourage leaders to allow their staff to make mistakes because that's how you grow.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I need to ask you the question that I ask everyone, this question around value and your experience. When and how have you felt the most valued in your work, and how has that changed over the years? How do you feel it or know it now these days? What was it like when you were 25?
I love that question. And I can't do anything well if I don't feel like I'm adding value. I can't. And when I worked for organizations where I didn't feel that, it was time for me to go. Like I was no longer a culture fit. I'm not feeling that I'm being valued and I'm adding value. And I know I brought this up a couple of times during this conversation. So I've had those times where I was like, why am I even here? And there were some roles that I had that I was making very good money, but I didn't feel like my contribution mattered and it wasn't worth it. So that you can ride those things out for so long. But if you're true to yourself, you can't, like, even if it's money, you don't do things just for money. There's people who say that they leave organizations because they didn't get enough money. I don't think that's true. Every person I ever dug deeper with, they left because of the relationship or lack of with their direct manager. It's the number one reason all the time.
Right.
But it also has to do with the value that you add in the organization and the value that you feel. Are you being valued? Right. So in a sense, some people feel value when I give all this and in exchange, I get this. And that could be compensation, bonus, or even just public recognition.
Yep.
So I have felt like I wasn't adding value and I was just collecting a paycheck, and it was just so dang boring for me that I left. I've been in organizations where I had the CEO tell me, Jeannie, we are not hiring one individual into this organization until you've met with them. You tell me what your intuition says and you approve the hire.
Wow.
I was like, whoa, that's amazing, because that means he values just me as who I am and what I can like contribute to the evaluation of this person and if they're a good culture fit or not. That was I felt like, you could pay me $5 an hour and I'd stay here because I just feel like I matter.
Yes, you matter.
And I belong. And just based on what he had tasked me with that, I felt like he needed me in this organization to grow. That's huge. Those feelings, I would do anything for them. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
Wow. I have to ask you, I have to go back. I feel like I'm going backwards, but I have to, that you were saying that, that the number one reason that people will leave is because of the relationship or, the lack thereof with their direct boss. And I have considered over the years that there's a lot of pressure on a boss to be able to cultivate that relationship, especially if they have several people working under them. Have you seen, and not everyone, we're not going to have a strong, awesome affinity with everyone, but have you seen bosses who, sure, they didn't have it perfect with everyone, but they were still, negotiating in ways that made people feel valued and such? Like, that is possible, right?
Yeah, 100% possible. And you're totally right that not everyone is going to connect deeply with everyone, especially as the team gets bigger. There's always going to be, at this 10% we can't live without each other. This 70%, give or take, they're doing a good job. I like them. And this bottom, it's the bottom 10%, top 20. The bottom 10%, I don't know, I do everything. But with that bottom 10% and the others, sit with them and say, what do you need from me? So, this isn't your first rodeo. You've worked elsewhere. What do you need from me as a manager? And that should be in the interview process. What do you need? What do you not need from your manager? And ask them. And I think that this is the number one, what managers forget to do. They forget to ask their staff what they need, what they need. How do you need me to manage you? And some people might say, because no one's going to say micromanage me. But you know what? Say, for example, at the very beginning, what do you need from me? You know what? I would love it if once a week I could have your time. The first 10 minutes, we just get to know each other. And then the next 20 minutes of our 30-minute meeting, I want to talk about this, and I want to end with this. The last 5 minutes, let's talk about what we're going to do for that week, so we know how to start the next meeting, what I'm responsible for. That would be ideal. So, and oftentimes employees, how would I know that? How would I know to even, we don't know what we don't know, right? So search for that. How are successful people working with their managers? You can find it. Well, I said it's hard to find things on Google, but go to YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some things that are very easy to find on Google.
But again, we brought up this curious communication. Ask questions, and then how do you normally work with your staff? Well, I do this, and this. And as an employee, you should be asking that in the interview process.
Right.
How do you normally work with your staff? Oh, I just give them something that I meet with them once a year. Oh, well, that probably isn't going to work for me because you have more experience than me and I would love to meet once a week. Is that even possible? And if the leader's like, I don't have time to meet with you once a week, I'm hiring you because you know how to do this, then maybe that's not where you want to be.
Right. Yeah.
You ask all the questions about, and you'll figure out what the culture is like in that organization and that leadership style. But it really comes down to, if you have a staff of 20, ask them, what would you bet? How do you best work?
Yeah. Right.
And two questions I always asked in the interview process is, tell me about the best manager, the relationship that you in your previous work, and why was it so great? And then obviously, what type of characteristic was a manager that you want to avoid in the future?
Yeah.
So ask those open-ended questions. The behavioral based questions give you so much information.
Wow. Okay. So much here. So such a rich conversation. I want to tell people where they can find you. Do you, what are your various access points?
So I'm on most of the social medias, but you can find all the links directly from the website. Is probably the easiest place. And it's Dynamism. So it's DYNAMISM leadership.com.
Fantastic. And I will include that link in the description for this as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much. This has been awesome. So much to learn and to unpack here. So yeah.
Thanks for having me. And I feel like you and I could talk forever.
Probably. I will reach out next time I'm in the San Diego area.
For sure. Absolutely. For sure. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thanks for being here, Jeannie. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you have it. Episode 20 is in the books. As I mentioned in the intro, I wanted to talk about a question that Jeannie gives to bosses to ask of their direct reports. And of course, I always like to flip these things around, because what if you're the direct report? What if no one is reporting to you? And the question was, what do you need from me? So a boss is saying, what do you need from me in order to do your job well, in order to execute well on the goals we have set out? This is a fantastic question for a boss to ask. And it's a really great question if you're the direct report to think about. Think about your roles, responsibilities, goals, whatever is required by your job. And if things aren't always so easy, or there's things that your boss could help with, you could just describe what those things are, and you could do it in a way that is not defensive and that is not passive aggressive. I know a lot of individual contributors who can come across sometimes as passive aggressive, especially when they're not getting their needs met. And I think that for some human beings, it's very difficult to articulate what they need. I think also that there's some really complicated stuff that happens in organizations where we're almost relying on bosses a little bit like parents that maybe didn't give us what we needed, or certain things are being acted out. I know that passive aggression actually is learned way before anyone enters their work life. So it's a strategy that we learn in our youth with, imperfect adults around us. And when I say imperfect adults, I really mean imperfect humans. None of us are doing everything perfectly and beautifully. So no matter what, children are learning strategies to deal and cope within their environments. And sometimes that strategy is passive aggression. And this might mean that you have a really hard time articulating what you want, what you need, what you think you should have in terms of, being an individual contributor and what would help you get your job done better. You do have a job. It doesn't mean that someone else is taking away all of your role and responsibility. It just means that if there are things that you need to get clear on, to get more information about, if there's something that a boss could do to make that something easier for you, that's kind of their role. So you could begin to articulate this, and it could also be a place for you to begin to discover if a boss has the ability to really lead you in a way that, would make your work life better. We don't always need to stay in roles, right? I think we've seen enough in the episodes that we've had on, the people we've talked to, that it's not always appropriate to stay in a role, and you might be better off somewhere else in some situations. I want to say too that sometimes I think direct reports need or want more clarity, which I think is important. It's important to be clear on your goals and what's expected of you. But sometimes leadership, bosses, whomever, they don't have all of the information yet. Sometimes there's not full disclosure of a reason why a decision was made or something like that. And the willingness or the ability to just kind of sit in ambiguity and move forward on specific steps with some understanding that it's in the direction that the organization wants, sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that really is enough, and we just kind of have to sit in that space. And actually, it's kind of freeing not having to know all of the answers and all of the pieces. You don't have to be the executive. You don't have to be in their brain and try to understand why things are going the way they are. Again, being able to sit with ambiguity is actually an asset if you can move forward within that space. I've also been doing some reflections personally around ideas of control, and there's this necessary balancing act that humans need to have. We need to have enough discipline to not lose control and to not create rebellion in our environments, and we also need enough flexibility in order to change, adapt, and accommodate new situations. I think sometimes when we want super clarity or we feel like someone's not being transparent enough, this is leading back to these ideas of control that might not be useful, might not be reasonable, just something to think about. But if we can be in that right balancing place between enough discipline to not lose control and loosening it up so that we can be flexible in order to change, those are key to self-leadership, which is one of the big tenets of Work Dope and all of the themes that we talk about here. The more self-leadership, really the more responsibility you assume for the outcomes in your life and the experience of your life. And the more self-leadership, the more your fulfillment, your happiness, your freedom, all of these things are more in your control. Here I am using that word again, but you really kind of own it when you take responsibility over these things, and you can sit in these spaces of ambiguity with enough discipline, but not too much discipline. And even acknowledging, your ability to take ownership and leadership, even when you work, live, and interact with messy situations, messy organizations, and messy humans. This is the cutting edge of human growth and human potential. And again, ask for one-on-ones if you're not having it. You need time one-on-one with your boss. And even if it's once a month, ask for that time. As always, please send me any comments, messages, notes, any reflections, any reactions to the content we're having here on Work Dope. You can send me a note or a recorded message to Linda@workdopepod.com. That's Linda@workdopepod.com. Thanks, and have a great week.